Are we on? Good morning, everybody. We are here for another one of our steering committee meetings, and again, I appreciate everybody coming this morning. I'm Brad Wimmer with the Fargo City Commission, and we'll take some introductions quickly around the room, and then I'll turn it over to Jim. We've got a busy, almost 2-hour meeting today, so again, we will start quickly, and we've got a couple people listening to us. We'll have them introduce themselves as we get around somehow here. New technology. So again, Brad Wimmer from the committee, from the Fargo City Commission. Jim?
Jim Hinderocker, Senior Planner, Fargo.
John Paulson, Chair of the Planning Commission.
Steve Stoner, Park Company.
Joe Nigg, Fargo-Moorhead Council of Governments.
Bryce Johnson, Home Builders Association.
Jeff Morrow, Fargo Planning Commission.
Mark Fitton, Fargo City Engineer.
Bob Stein, Fargo Planning.
Brenda Derrick, Fargo City Engineering.
Jeremy Gordon, Transportation Engineer.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo City Commission, past captain of the Bison football team in 1983. Go Bison.
All equal to Go Bison. Great call on that. Captain Knudsen, I'm student body president at NDSU.
Ron Sorbog, Fargo Park Board Commissioner and also North Dakota State Senator.
Kim Lepetsky with Fargo Cast Public Health.
Craig Whitney with the Chamber.
Good morning, Roger Grass, Fargo Park District.
Jan Alford Stewart with the Fargo Planning Commission.
Kelly Steffes with the Planning Commission.
Brandon Byers, student at Fargo Davies.
Stephanie Falkers, SRF Consulting Group.
John Miller, Fargo Planning Commission.
Stephen, Zach, I don't know if can you hear us?
Yeah, we can hear you, particularly when you speak in the microphones.
You want to do maybe a short intro? And
Sure. My name's Stephen Hardy. I'm the Director of Planning at BNIM, and we've been working with the city over the last about 9 months now on the comprehensive plan.
I'm Zach Flanders. I'm a planner at BNIM.
Also with us today, we do have the chair from NEA. I'll let Nicole maybe give a little brief introduction. I want to give a nice warm welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for letting us jump into your meeting here. We have a special guest with us today, the National Endowment for the Arts Chairman, Rocco Landesman. And one of the things that, and I'll just do a quick introduction. In September, we started working on a collaboration with local artists in our engineering department to look at our stormwater detention basins in our neighborhoods and see about how we can make those more inclusive in developing, incorporating our culture and community needs at a broader level. And because of that, in our collaboration with an ecological artist, Jackie Brickner out of New York, we received a grant. We're very honored to receive the Our Town grant, and it's a great example of what you'll be talking about later today in our key initiatives in related to public art and how this can be all inclusive and working with community-wide. So with that, I'll introduce Rocco, and he wanted to share a few words.
Well, thanks, Nicole, and thank you all for giving me a chance to eavesdrop a little bit. Basically, you're doing and have been doing what we are talking a lot about at the NEA, which is creative placemaking. And we're talking about using the arts to literally change the shape and nature and ethos of a place. It's physical and an economic character. At the NEA, we've been saying for a long time that the arts have a vital role in neighborhood revitalization and the changing of the character of places for the better. And it's obvious to me that Fargo has, from an arts perspective, all the ingredients that you need for success in a community, at least as we see it from the perspective of the arts, which is a tradition of the arts, historically a certain scale of artistic activity. I was just on the way here passing an art space project for artist housing, and I'm aware of the history of the arts in Fargo, an engaged philanthropic sector, engaged individuals, corporations, philanthropies in an area, and Fargo has that, and a local political structure, which is to some extent, you guys, who get it and who are committed to that and to that kind of change. And what's neat for me to see right away, and as I saw it as everybody went around and introduced themselves, is the collaboration among so many different elements in the community coming together at a table like this. I'm a theater guy, and I always think of theater as the most collaborative of the arts. There's so many different elements that have to come together. You know, the director, the actors, the design team, the producers, if it's a musical, the composer and lyricist. All the different elements have to come together and work in harmony, and to see all of the different points of view represented and constituencies represented at a table like this, here for one purpose, which is collaboration and cooperation. It's pretty neat. I'm going to be spending a good part of the day engaging your drainage system, the drainage pools, and our grant is really with Jackie Bruckner to find a way to make those as aesthetic and engaging and welcoming as possible, to use them as an opportunity for making Fargo more beautiful. And we hope to play a small role in that with the pilot projects that we're funding. So, thanks for having me here. Thanks for being so hospitable, and I'm curious as the day goes on to listen and learn a lot. Thanks.
Thank you. And then we do have a few minutes for Q&A, maybe if there's any questions at all. If not, we're going to head on to the library where we'll meet some more of our project partners, and then there's a press conference at 10:15, so hopefully watch us on the news. Any questions for anybody?
Mr. Landsman, one of the things we've been discussing is a way to, you mentioned it really well, I think, is early in the design phase, just like with your plays, to bring more perspectives to the table instead of, in the past it's been planners and engineers, and now,
Post from the top.
Exactly. So, we've got a lot of talent to tap into, and we spend a lot, we invest a lot in infrastructure here. Some years as much as $70 million. So it seems that it's a real opportunity in the design phase of these projects to bring it in on the early end to get, look at it as a palette for the various professions and bring in that creative aspect. Are you familiar with some other cities that have been doing this for a while, and what's a good way to get started with that? Well, you want to come up to the mic, please? Thanks.
Well, I think the way you summed it up is the right one. You're spending all this money. Why not make it aesthetic? It doesn't cost that much more to make it engaging and appealing. And we funded a project in Madison, which is where Madison, Wisconsin, where I went to college. They were building what's called Central Park on a brownfield. And we gave them a grant to hire an artist to bring a design element into the process, an aesthetic element. It doesn't cost that much more to do it. You're building the park anyway. Why not have some sense of how you want it to look, and are there aesthetic elements? We've done similar thing in Greensboro, North Carolina, and Winston-Salem, North Carolina. In Greensboro, there was a kind of greenway around the ring the town that was made out of old railroad beds and abandoned roadways, and there were points along that where there were bridges or intersections where just a little bit of design attention could have made these really aesthetic and really welcoming and pleasing, so that people would enjoy walking or running around that ring. It doesn't take a lot more in terms of time or money, just a little bit of attention to make it something aesthetic and pretty. So we've done that wherever we can.
Did you do an RFQ first, or did you do an RFP, or how did you come about selecting? What was the selection process for that?
What we did was they applied to us for. We have a program called Our Town. It's called Our Town because I'm a play person, and it's the name of a play. And one of the things I get to do at the NEA is to name things. But we had this money allocated for this, and we took applications from communities all around the country. It was a very competitive process, thousands of applications. And the projects that seem the most compelling and the most interesting and the most doable, where we want to have a good chance of success, are the ones we funded. And of course, one of the winners was here in Fargo.
Thank you, and I'll let you get back to your meeting. And I just also want to recognize our team partners today, Megan with the Plains Art Museum, Jan with the State Council of Arts, and then we have staff from Senator Conrad's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. I think we'll go ahead and get started with the meeting itself. I really appreciate everybody coming today. There's a lot of stuff that we want to get through. The number one thing that I want to make sure that people understand today, that I want this to be a very open dialogue. It's just not me talking up here as we go through the presentation itself. In your packet, we've got a copy of the agenda. There's really just a couple of things that we want to focus on today. One of those is going through the guiding principles and making sure whether or not we've got the right ones, if there's any that we want to add, take away from that kind of thing. And the same thing with the key initiatives. That's really the focus of today's meeting. In addition to the agenda, I do have, as mentioned, a few handouts. The first one is the guiding principles themselves. You can see that, and you can also see the rankings that took place for the key initiatives at the public meetings, the Mind Mixer website, and also from this particular steering committee site. That was that bean exercise that we went through. The color document is a little more description in terms of the guiding principles and those key initiatives that we want to go through. And the big packet that you have, and this was also emailed out, this is actually the working outline and the actual draft document itself. While I'm not maybe looking for specific things today, as you go over the next few weeks, if you get a chance to actually go through this document, if there's anything that you see in there that you've got some comments about, by all means, get back to me. We want to hear from you about that. And then the last document is the survey that took place that was dealing specifically with the Home Builders Association as well as the economic development. Excuse me, the Chamber of Commerce, not the Economic Development. With the Chamber of Commerce, we wanted to hear from those folks that maybe weren't as involved in the public meetings or on the Mind Mixer website. So those are the documents that are before you. What I wanted to do a little bit is just recap exactly where we've been with this. Starting out, staff put together some baseline reports. We've held a couple of public meetings, and we've had that Mind Mixer website, so we're gathering a lot of public input. We've had this survey, and I think there's some things there that we want to get into at the end of the meeting I think are pretty interesting. And then also with this body and the technical committee, I think we've got a lot of different input in terms of those principles and key initiatives. Why are we doing this? Our projections for 2030, we're going to be at about 135,000 people in our community in less than 20 years. And we all know we've got limited resources. We've got commissioners here that have a lot of people lobbying them on things that they support. We heard from NEA today in terms of the importance of arts and culture, and we've heard a lot about that from Mind Mixer and from folks from the public. But we've also have other limitations on our resources. We've got people very concerned about flood protection, economic development in our community, quality of life type things. And so, how should we spend our money? This document is going to guide those decisions. That's setting the policy. So, it's very important as we start to look at the city growing into the future. The one thing that I think is pretty unique about Fargo is that we're very fortunate here in North Dakota in terms of our economy. Our unemployment rate, September 2011, 2.9. I mean, that's just amazing how low our unemployment rate is here. When you look at nationally, I think we're now at just under 9%, 8.6%. Real estate vacancy, office vacancies, still very low. The one thing that I think is interesting, you always hear, is that owner-occupied versus rental. We're maybe a little high on the rental side, but I think there's some things that are indicative of Fargo that's unique, and it's maybe not that out of ordinary for us. Some things, I want to have some stuff up here about what we had heard. Apologize for those. We do have the PowerPoint behind you. A lot of that stuff's in your packet as well, but we want to make Fargo walkable, focus on public transportation, want a friendly community. We also want a beautiful community. We heard an awful lot about that from folks that were involved in the public meetings and from the Mind Mixer website. Some of the leading ideas that we have had from the housing and neighborhoods, this idea of a walkable neighborhood is probably ranking right up there on the top in terms of importance. We had the Mind Mixer website was also showing that it was very important for people that we have this walkable neighborhood. The other ones that we were looking at from transportation and infrastructure, the design that we have a community that is bicycle friendly. And again, it's this kind of idea that we have walkable, we've got a bicycle community, we also focus on transit, and that our neighborhoods are supportive of that. From the land use side of things and urban design, there was some discussion about sprawl. Wanted to focus on infill. But I do know that as we started to work through this, we also heard strongly from the Home Builders Association about the importance of our new development, and that we don't want to lose sight of that. And I think that's one of the things when we start to look at the way this plan is shaping out, that is actually addressing both of those elements. And then we also heard a lot about the importance of healthy living, healthy foods, and healthy lifestyle. So those are some of the leading ideas that we heard from the folks on the Mind Mixer website in terms of what they saw as important and what should be priorities for our community. Just want to bring up the vision statement. Once again, we've talked about this at the last meeting. We also spent some time with this with our Planning Commission, talking about Fargo being a vibrant and sustainable city with a high quality of life, robust economy, and welcoming community atmosphere. This is where we really want to get into when we start looking at the first item on the agenda today is the guiding principles. And we've talked about these. We've got these 7 guiding principles: water and the environment, energy, health, transportation, economy, neighborhoods with infill and new development, and arts and culture. What I'm very interested in today is that are these the right ones? Following the last steering committee meeting, based on the discussion and feedback we heard from that and also from our planning commission, we've actually added a couple of new ones. One of those is education. The guiding principle there being that Fargo will uphold and improve its world-class K through 12 education system. Fargo will continue to embrace the universities and post-secondary education institutions that acknowledge their positive influence on the economy, workforce, and the culture of Fargo. I think what I heard loud and clear is that we've got a very robust educational system, but we want to continue that moving forward to 2030. I think about the impact that NDSU has on the community. We've got the downtown campus, everything that's going on there. I think it's very important that we have a plan that is supportive of that. The other issue that we heard about, and it was not included in one of the guiding principles, was just safety. The idea that we've got an excellent place to live and we feel very secure. We've got good police and fire protection, and we want to make sure that we're continuing to promote that and have that visibility and kind of eyes on the street, if you will. And so a lot of that has to do with neighborhood design, that it is something that is safe and secure. I think there's a lot of different elements. You start talking about safety that actually overlap a lot of these different guiding principles and key initiatives that we've seen. So from that, I'm kind of curious at this point in time, before I move on, if you take a look at the handout that we had where it lists those guiding principles. I know we've talked about these and you've seen these, but do we feel that these are really encompassing the major elements for the city of Fargo? Should there be others added? Should we look at consolidating some of these? What are some thoughts? Mike.
Jim, you serve with us on the library steering committee meeting, and it's good. We're doing our 5-year library plan right now. We just got done with our 5-year bike ped plan. We're just doing our transit development plan for 5 years. But in the library plan, we're trying to sync up with this comprehensive plan. And just what we talked about yesterday as far as education goes, I think that this is really good. But one thing we might want to touch on is, we're talking about K through 12. And I know that's important, but I think early childhood education, that's a big focus for the library, so before kindergarten, and then basically lifelong learning. What if we just added something like that, lifelong learning, to this K through 12? Because there's a lot of people that may be retired that really like access to the university system and being a part of the community, and that's a huge attractant, I think, for people that want to find an interesting place to live and continue their learning throughout their life. It's just an idea. Lifelong learning to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent comment. Since this particular guiding principle is one that's been added to that, we don't have the key initiatives yet like we do have under the other categories. So I think that'd be a really good one to look at.
I think I agree with Mike with regard to education. I would really strengthen the comment in this paragraph having to do with North Dakota State University. You talk about a Division I institution with 20,000 people, the impact on us now and in the future is going to be enormous. So I would heavily emphasize, in addition to the K-12 system, the presence of North Dakota State University here in Fargo.
Other comments or suggestions?
Well, as long as I'm being mouthy, I would when you talk about in the under health, ensuring access to quality health care, I think we should add something that emphasizes the health care systems that are available in this community. I mean, we are one of the premier health care centers in the country, and I think that ought to be heavily emphasized, and I also think we ought to emphasize heavily one more point having to do with the business community in the economy part of this, to emphasize work that is done by our chambers and by the business community to help make Fargo the place that it is in terms of living and working and rearing our children.
Thanks, John.
Jim, just a comment, and I'm interested to hear from everybody else. It just seems like we're almost too broad. We're trying to tackle too many things, but that's just my opinion. And I'm interested to hear you guys from the advisor role, what their thoughts are. But it seems like we've got too much on the table, and to maybe bring a few of them together. And they're all good. And again, I'm encouraging everybody here to not keep so quiet and give us an opinion on your thoughts on that. I mean, all good ideas and all things that bring a healthy city together. But it seems like in 20 years, we're not going to be able to tackle all of these things.
Yeah, go ahead. He's speaking to the mic, too, I guess.
I would think that neighborhoods, infill, new development, I would think the green space, walkable community. I see nothing in here, Jim, on parks, park development. Am I missing something?
Well, one thing to keep in mind, too, when you look at these guiding principles, these are the main headings. Then we have the key initiatives that go along with those. So it's actually, maybe it's easier if we actually use this document when you're looking at it. It'll have those same headings, and then it shows the key initiatives that are underneath each one of those.
So guiding principles, then we'll follow. We'll pick that up later.
Right, but I think it's important if there's something there that maybe isn't talked about. If you look at those key initiatives, maybe if there's not enough emphasis on the green space or something like that, and you want to add that, we want to make sure we're covering that. But
And it should be in there, Roger, because that certainly was, the biking, the walking, the activity 12 months out of the year was a huge part of the discussion.
Yeah, but I didn't see that under guiding principles, so I just want to ask that question.
Well, maybe there's a guiding principle that's called recreation, or maybe there's a guiding principle that's called quality of life that can embrace some of those things.
Okay.
But definitely, yeah, I'm missing that too, Roger. It seems to make sense.
Yeah, I know when I first read through this, that was my question too, is where's the parks? And as you read through the whole document, it's mixed in here, down in here. But what you might be saying is it needs to be more upfront
Well,
in terms of.
I agree that it needs to
one of
have an
these
overview or an umbrella category.
Yeah.
There's plenty.
I mean, it should be a main category, in my opinion. There should be a
guiding
yeah,
principle.
without a doubt, because of course, that's without going into all of that. But Jim's department certainly is key to the district, to the park district, because they're kind of the forward observer for the district. Because there's nothing that comes into Fargo today without some kind of green space, walkable community that ties the neighborhoods together, the schools and so forth. So that, I mean, again, it's very overarching, and I don't.
And again, I think this is a good conversation to have. I mean, the guiding principles, there's a tremendous amount of overlap that actually takes place with these. And, one of the challenges that I think we were looking at as well, do you expand all of those and you have every single category, and then it becomes too much? Brad just mentioned maybe we've got too many here right now. And so, I don't know, Stephen, I don't know if that's something that maybe you can talk a little bit about in terms of the framework of the comprehensive plan and why this particular list of guiding principles, and, if this is appropriate versus expanding out and having a lot more bullet points, if you will.
Right. Well, I'd say you're right around the right number of chapters. I mean, it may be helpful to think about it as as having these as chapters. To the question in particular about do we have too much on the list, that's a good question to be asking. I think typically you want to make sure that the comprehensive plan endorses work that's being done by the city, but also that's being done by not-for-profits or other agencies in the city, so that you're giving room for one coordinated effort to be accomplishing things that are important to the entire community. So part of the work that we still have to do is to be prioritizing within those categories. So it becomes, the guiding principles are really about establishing the framework within which recommendations and agencies in the city can be operating towards one larger goal. And the work that we still have ahead of us is to be prioritizing where within those guiding principles that you want to be spending more time. Now to the question of parks in particular, right now that's really covered in two places, in water and environment and in health. And so the open space itself, we've kind of put in the water and environment category. How people engage that space, we've put more in the health category. And we have gone back and forth on that as a guiding principle, but it allowed us to actually be, I think, more comprehensive by looking at it in those two different categories. So I think that we'd still be open to investigating another way for it to fit, but I'd just suggest taking a look at those two on the sheet that shows the key initiatives and kind of judging for yourself whether or not we've done a good job of capturing that important element in Fargo.
Thanks, Stephen. So what Stephen was saying, if we take a look at the color sheet here, if you look at underwater and environment, we actually do list out parks, open space, and the habitat. And there's also, under the health guiding principle, there also talks about the importance of recreation and those types of amenities. And, you know, does that cover what we want to have it cover, or do we want to look at doing something a little different than that? So I don't know if anybody has any comments about that.
But it looks, Jim, it looks just a little bit more passive, and with just years of experience, you can look at it. I mean, parks are an economic engine in many cases when it comes to where is someone going to develop, where do we build a school, education happens in the parks, sports happen in the parks, quality of life issues, they open up a neighborhood, they allow a neighborhood to breathe. So it would just seem to me that rather than to be hidden under something, but I might be a little bit partisan.
That's probably a good thing, Roger.
I'm not known to be partisan, no.
Unless you added in like water, environment, parks, or health, recreation, or add it to the title.
Mm-hmm. Well, Roger, you know, again, I'm not, as much as we're promoting the arts and what's going on today, the parks are here. The arts, we know we're lacking in some of the viewable and what we see around town, et cetera. So we sort of.
But if you don't emphasize it, Commissioner, they may not be here.
Right. That's what I'm saying. They're here, and we're sort of taking them for granted.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not emphasizing it. We know that it's one of the number one things that. And I'd like to hear the young people talk a little bit on what they think the emphasis for activity and whatnot should be.
But again, you take out the park, you take out the festivals, you take out the trees, you take out the green space, you take out the, you know, and on and on and on.
Well, it's a huge important part, but everybody's vocalized that.
Yep.
But we don't seem to have it down. But I'd like to hear our Davie student and our NDSU student give a little opinion.
I agree that the park should probably be under its own chapter instead of separate sub-chapters. I think that does shy away from kind of the need for it. I think that's...
The city's commitment to parks financially is really in excess of all the rest of these categories combined. You know, the budgetary amount of money we spend as a community for parks and growth and all of that truly exceeds all of the rest of the categories on the page. I mean, so we should give it due credit, is what I would say.
On this sheet, where is the emphasis or is there an emphasis on the role of the business community in Fargo, in this document?
If I could just add to that, one thing that's really lacking on this is it doesn't really talk about attracting new business at all. Under economy, you have educate and retain the best workforce. I'd say we also want to attract the best workforce, or recruit, and also attract new business. The city plays a big part in the Economic Development Corporation's role, and they're left out of this entire comprehensive plan. I think the EDC's work and everybody else's work attracting new business should be a crucial part of this. And we talk about, even on the economy things, we talk about some things, beautification as an economic development tool and things like that, but nowhere is the word attract or new business in there anywhere. And bringing in new business kind of keeps our city alive and, keeps people building homes from my point of view and everything else, but it keeps us should be a crucial part.
Jim, also, unless I'm missing something, I don't see the emphasis on education in this piece. Am I missing that?
That's actually because we just added those. We don't have the key initiatives too that we added public safety and we added education, so that would be in addition to the ones that you're seeing here.
And I would just add maybe to both Mike and John's comments on education, you might be able to track it from early childhood, tying that to the importance of workforce development and how that plays together, as well as more focus with NDSU on the research component and the fact that we have a major research university here. And so I would just add those comments.
Thank you.
I agree with Craig's comments, Jim, very much.
Yeah, I'd also echo that. It'd be great to see NDSU listed as part of education. And one thing that came up in prior meetings was looking at connecting the campus to downtown or to other parts of the city, whether it's via bike paths or, I know we've got a few parks in between, and so tying the parks in with the bike path could be a good option as well. But that'd be a great component to link our campus to the main downtown part of Fargo.
And just to add to that, Jim and I had a meeting with President Brashani just the other day, and they're very, very enthusiastic about linking the main campus to downtown, and on that University Drive corridor, bringing the downtown campus closer to the main campus. And I think that'll be a big impact for us in the future.
John, if you don't mind giving us a little bit of historical perspective, back a long time ago, the campus used to be outside of town, or that used to be, the campus was someplace far away. So maybe if you don't mind, and I hate to pick on.
Why are you asking John? Yeah.
Why would you pick on John Paulson?
I'm not picking pepcorn.
You're the captain.
After seeing the pictures this morning, John, they were giving you a bad time about it. So I hope you didn't take that the wrong way. But it is kind of interesting that that's how it used to be, and it used to be kind of an adversarial relationship that the university was kind of thought of as a separate entity, and so we've made great progress.
Yeah, we have, and Jim had made a number of wonderful comments the other day when we met with the president and his key leadership group in terms of binding the university even more to the city and vice versa.
Can I just say one thing about, I think that economic vibrancy, that's critical to have that in there. And the one thing I would say is that the university, I mean, our futures are tied together. And one of the best things that is happening now, when I hate to talk about, I'm a has-been Bison, but when I graduated, all the engineers could not stay in Fargo. They all had to go to Minneapolis, Denver, Seattle, and now more and more they have the opportunity. And not everybody wants to live in Fargo, which that's how it is, but lots of people would if they have the opportunity, and now they're getting more and more of that chance to stay here, and I think that's something that we want to build on. That's our most valuable commodity that we used to send 100% out of state, and now we're keeping more and more here.
We recruited one from UND.
Just one, huh? Well, thank you. I think what I'm hearing in terms of the guiding principles that there's maybe a lack of wording, including parks, and maybe we could take a look at incorporating that, whether it's its own or not, or adding it to one of the existing titles. And I'm hearing people say that the addition of education as a guiding principle is clearly one that we wanted to have within that. I don't know if there's any other comments specifically with some of the other guiding principles before we get into the key initiatives.
Well, Jim, I just want to reiterate what John said, and Craig and all that, and Rocky. We need to mention the business world because, and we went around this in the public meetings, if we don't have a healthy, vibrant business community, the rest of this becomes irrelevant. And I think there needs, you know, we have the economy, but more detail or something defining our business community, because it's the key to all this. The rest of it doesn't work without it, and it should be part of your guiding principle.
So it appears there's just some key words we're missing on some of our bolder, because it appears that they're missing, but as we dig, they're there, but they just need to be bolder and emphasized more.
Good. Good.
You're right.
Any comments down on that end of the table? Brenda's looking at me.
You know, I just thought of something. There isn't anything in here about technology. And I think we're pretty fortunate to have some pretty high-tech businesses here. I don't know how that could be incorporated into this.
Thank you.
But the way the world's going, it's going to be more and more technologically based. So from a kind of a younger person's perspective.
We do, if you take a look on the economy on it's the green section, maybe it's on the back side of that page, we do talk about technology and infrastructure of technology. So that may be the area that you're referring to. But again, what I'm hearing say is there's maybe some key words that ought to be included in the actual guiding principle. You know, you got that little shorthand, you just say economy, maybe it needs to be a little more broad-based than that, is what I'm hearing folks say.
Yeah, when you're just picking up on what Jeremy said, you know, if you combine the research park at NDSU and just recall what happened the other day when Hitachi and Microsoft had that big announcement here, just think of what that means to us going forward into the next century.
Well, I think that's some good discussion. And again, you know, if you think about something after the fact, by all means, let us know, and we can try to incorporate that as well. The other thing that we were looking at, in addition to the guiding principles that we took from the public meetings and from the Mind Mixer site, is what we're calling some big ideas. And this is actually just on the overhead that I have up. And there were a number of those that came to the forefront. I don't think this one is a big surprise, but this idea of permanent flood protection is something that is, without a doubt, a big idea. What we're talking about there is that we don't want to lose sight of our goal for diversion. I think that covers across the board all of these issues when you start talking about the economy and businesses and the school and housing and all of that. We've got to have flood protection. And so clearly that was one of those big ideas that we want to have in place. Energy and efficiency, we heard a lot about this. This is not just, I mean, our funding source was from the Department of Energy for this comp plan update, but we heard an awful lot of comments from people at the public meetings and on Mind Mixer about the importance of conservation and finding ways to conserve energy. And so that is something that is an overriding theme throughout the plan. This is the area that I think is pretty interesting. We talked about strategic density areas. From the comments we heard from people, there was people that absolutely loved our downtown and like to see more mixed use, higher density kind of things, but we also heard from people that were very interested in maintaining our newer development. You got the Woodhaven, Osgood, you got Point West, those type of developments were single family housing, not overly high density by any means, and there's still a desire for that. And so we were looking at a way, how could we actually take and try to increase our overall density, but maintain some of that new development that we're experiencing. And the strategy we're looking at is this idea of creating strategic density areas. So it's taking like our downtown area would be an example of one of those, maybe expanding beyond that, where we'd have more residential in this area, more mixed-use type development. And then moving down to a couple of different scenarios that I wanted to point out. If you take a look at our current trends, we've got about 44% owner-occupied, 56% in the rental multifamily, and that's just kind of the mix in terms of residential. In commercial, I would say most commercial is kind of standalone. That's where you're seeing that 90%. You might have 10% where you've got some mix of residential and commercial. We've got, you know, an example of downtown, our industrial kind of standalone. What we're looking at for the strategic density is not really changing a whole lot with the residential in terms of our typical development that we have, but is there a way that we could take certain areas and and maybe change that commercial residential mix. And that's the strategic density areas that we're talking about. An example of that may be where the new urban plains is at. I know they've had a desire to have a much more mixed-use type development where you've got commercial and residential. And I think by looking at that, we can achieve some overall increased densities in terms of our square acreage that we have in our community, and also have those population centers where we're hearing a lot of young people. They like that type of living lifestyle in terms of where they're around commercial and those kind of things. And then the industrial would wind up staying the same. So we're actually looking at a couple of different scenarios, one with the status quo and then one with increasing that more mixed use, but it's more defined as density nodes or these strategic density areas. The one that I actually probably think that we would see, and I would say this is probably an example of where urban plains could be, with a new Sanford that's going in place. Maybe there's something that happens there as well, but you've got these strategic density areas, and we've got sustainable mixed-use centers. And so where in our community could we maybe try to emulate that? We've got the downtown. I think clearly that's really kind of a standalone in terms of what's going on there, encourage some expansion of that. But are there other areas in our community where we could maybe apply that kind of strategy? I think of urban plains. I also think maybe around the West Acres, the mall area. You've got the big apartments to the south of that. Are there ways that we could maybe change some things in there to try to have a better mix of commercial and residential? Obviously, the focus with that is more about scale, human scale. You've got good connections. It's a very vibrant area and aesthetically pleasing. And so design becomes an important criteria, I think, when you start looking at those kind of areas. The other thing we were looking at with the strategic density areas is neighborhood center. This is more maybe in line with kind of our traditional development that we've seen in Fargo, but you're in closer proximity to where you could maybe have some commercial opportunities where you could get, the loaf of bread or a gallon of milk, that kind of thing. The idea here, and we've had this in our comp plan, in our growth plan for a while, is that you're closer to things, that you don't necessarily have to get in your car for every single trip that you make. That you maybe could walk down to the store or ride your bike down to the store to get a quick something, or maybe you go to a restaurant or something like that, take the trail and walk to dinner one night versus get in your car. And so creating these neighborhood centers where you've actually got, a little bit more commercial around that core neighborhood. So we're looking at some of those as some strategies in terms of those big ideas, and that's some of the things that we heard from the public meetings and the mind mixer, and I think also from the steering committee. So another big idea was this idea of signature complete streets and active living streets. And where this is coming from, we've heard an awful lot of comments about we want to have a walkable, bikeable community, focus a little more on transit. And really what our strategy is that every single street in the city of Fargo allows for all of those. You've got the ability to walk, you've got the ability to bike, you've got transit, and you've got, focusing on automobiles as well. I think every single street in the city of Fargo probably has that. However, we do have what we want to look at as a signature complete street. I think the best example of that is Broadway. Without a doubt, that's a signature complete street. Everybody would identify with that. If you were talking to somebody that's coming into the community, where's that? If you had a signature street, what would you say it is? I think everybody would say Broadway. Should we create another? Are there some other spots that we want to look at that? We do have on the Big Ideas map these more active living streets where we're really encouraging folks to, maybe that's where we want to have them bike, the walking trails where you've got more amenities. It's an idea, like if you had a commercial, like say you had a restaurant, it may be very inviting to have a outdoor seating on that particular location. There's a lot more activity on that street. Some of those may be looking at 42nd Street. We may be looking at 32nd Avenue. Some of those might be good locations for an active living street. And so that was something that I think that in terms of a big idea that we really heard emerge from the public comment that we had. Another one that we had was this idea of having a citywide loop. A lot of people were very interested in being able to get around our community all year round. I mean, that was something that was very important. So we were actually identifying this trail, and some of this maybe is part of the flood buyouts and flood mitigation that we deal with, and ultimately maybe with the diversion, you've got this big loop around the entire city. And so that was something I think that came out as one of the top ideas. Regional recreational destinations, again, that was something that was very important. You probably have a number of examples with this, but Urban Plains with the new arena, Shields Arena, I think would qualify for that. Fargo Dome would obviously be a regional recreational destination, but could there be others? We talked about downtown or the things that we can wind up doing in the downtown area. And where should those be placed at in our community in terms of a geographic location? This idea of celebrating the river, you know, I think is really interesting when we start looking at that, especially historically. There was a lot of involvement along the river, and we really turn our backs to that. And this plan is looking at ways that we can try to celebrate that river. It's not just an obstacle to us or a challenge because of flood protection, but are there ways that we can do that? Are there certain spots, again, from a geographic location where it makes sense to have more involvement in embracing the river? And so I know everybody has seen the big ideas map in the past, and hopefully everybody's got a copy of that, but those are the major themes associated with the big ideas, and I don't know if we've got any specific comments from people about some of those different things that we're talking about, where those should be located at, but it's something that I'd like folks thinking about on this particular body. So I don't know if anybody's got any comments or questions about it.
Billboards and portable signs in Nicholas.
Billboards, portable signs, no, they're not on the list, Mark.
I'm getting a headache, Mark.
We can certainly start the discussion, though.
You know, if I could just state something about celebrating the river and year-round recreational opportunities, I think the city and the Park District should continue to work and improve our paths, try to expand our paths along the river corridor. And if you think about it, from 94 going north, it's a pretty nice system, but it could be improved north of Main, and it could continue north of where it currently ends. So people love river trails, and I think that's a very big example of what we could strive to improve on.
Jen?
Actually, I'm completely separate from Jeremy's comment, although I endorse them completely. I was just going to suggest that, or maybe question, the time that we need to perhaps add big ideas under the economy and education principles, because, in fact, if they're on our front page, so to speak, I think some of our big ideas need to capture. And while it wasn't specifically addressed prior to this month, surely that after all the dialogue that we've had, we can capture some of those and include them. Do you happen to know what they might be?
Well, you're talking about the two additional guiding principles, education and safety. We don't have specific key initiatives there yet. When we get to the key initiative discussion, I'd like to talk about that. I think one of them, for me, when we talk about education, that's probably could go onto the big ideas list as well, is that connection between the main campus and the downtown campus for NDSU. I would see that as, looking at that corridor and what is it we can do to better identify that as a corridor between those two campuses, and so it doesn't feel like there's a disconnect at all. I could see that as being a big idea. Is that really what you're kind of asking?
Yeah.
Maybe examples of that?
Yeah, I think we need to beef this up now.
Right. No, I agree. So do you have some examples
No,
that
I
you're?
don't. No,
okay.
Sorry.
But under the education, under the safety, those elements there in terms of what
Actually,
some
I
of
thought
those.
economy as well. Do we have any big ideas for economy?
There wasn't, on the big ideas map, there wasn't.
Okay.
I think getting back to the density areas, we have to remember that this is 20 years down the road, and everything will look significantly different. And I think it's a lot harder to change the image of a place like West Acres than it is to somewhere that is actually growing outwards. I remember in the map last time we had 52nd Street and South, we basically just put residential for the whole thing. And I think that was a bit too broad. It's a really large area down there, and there are houses already being built right next to Davies, and that is a long stretch of road. And I think that should be looked at more carefully. It's hard to change places like West Acres into images where you have like commercial and residential, but it's easy to develop a place and have its own image.
And what you're kind of saying is we've made some mistakes in the past, and you know, we could look along Main Avenue, we could look at West Acres, which is completely unwalkable, unbikeable. Yeah, it's almost a disaster in some ways. I can hardly take my life in my hands going to the Holiday Inn from West Acres. So try not to make those mistakes as we move forward with the 52nd Avenue South corridor.
Right. And I think we just placed a big residential sign on the map, I remember. And I think the closest commercial place was the Mixed in the Urban Plains area. And it's just a really large area that's already being built in that I don't think we're looking at carefully enough. I think developing places like West Acres and downtown, it'll be a lot harder than actually creating new areas, especially commercial down there.
I'm being repetitious, but I do think we need to really strongly think about the University Drive corridor, connecting the university with the main campus to the downtown area. I think that's going to be a big, big thing in the future.
I want to second that. I think that this disconnect is too great. We had a meeting with some students about a month ago at the Downtown Partnership Group, and that was one of their biggest requests. So I spent some time trying to look at what we could do, and you know, there was street improvements that took place along the 2nd Avenue corridor when the Berry Hall was done. But my gosh, from 10th to University, if you come down University to get downtown, that would be your turn to come in. I mean, the students were asking us to get flags and to do some things that would welcome students in and to make it look like the downtown was really supporting and part of the school. There wasn't even a place to hang a flag. I mean, we got wooden poles holding up lights, you know, in some of that part of town. So there's some things we could commit to and accomplish in a short time.
Well, try to keep us on task, not getting too much in the minutia of this. What I'm hearing is that we've got the guiding principles, maybe looking at trying to make sure there's some keywords that we wind up including with those guiding principles. We're fairly comfortable with the list that we had, adding education and adding the safety. When we get to the big ideas, I think I'm seeing heads nod that we like those. Jan mentioned maybe there should be some others because we didn't talk about like a big idea for under economy. Is there something that we could do that is under that heading that would be a big idea? I think for education, the comment about the connection between NDSU, downtown, and main campus probably would rise to that level. So maybe from that context, are there headings that we have under the guiding principles in terms of a big idea? Like Jan mentioned, we don't have anything as a big idea for the economy per se. I don't know, you know, when you take a look at the big ideas map, it was something that was almost more of a geographic thing. You could, you know, draw on a map and say, we're going to do this particular, it's like a project. The flood protection, you know, it's the diversion, it's that project around. When you talk about the economy, I don't know if there's a project per se. You know, maybe it's saying we want to attract a particular segment of a business, that kind of thing. But I'll open up for comments. Mike looked like he's got a comment.
I think John touched on one of the big, I mean, Hitachi coming to town can be huge, and so who knows, you know, maybe Hitachi at the U.S. Bank Plaza with the NDSU Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math Center downtown, and then this corridor enhancement that's been brought up, that all goes together. It's a huge opportunity, but man, some of this stuff is already happening. We can just make it go.
Some of this maybe, I think, the technology side, when you talk about Hitachi, that kind of thing, it all funds into the economy as well. I know this idea of retention of folks in our community and making sure that we've got that workforce that we need to have, all of that stuff I think is important.
Can I raise a different question and maybe ask the consultants about this? In the guiding principles, everything is Fargo will. It's got it will in the future, and I'm a little uncomfortable with the use of that. Sounds like everything is on the come and nothing has been accomplished yet in those guiding principles. And maybe you guys, you consultants, can help me out there.
Yeah. If I can, before maybe Stephen answers, at the last Brown Bag meeting with the Planning Commission, that was something that was very important to Planning Commission members, that we don't be negative about where we're at today. A lot of these things we're actually doing an excellent job on right now, and we want to make sure that we use terminology that acknowledges that, and I know that is something that we're going to be doing. So we may be changing that, but it's a great comment about, you know, we're not saying it's something that we'd like to do in the future if we're already doing it now and doing a good job. We just want to continue to do that. So I don't know, Stephen, if you have any other comments about that, but I do think that was an excellent observation from the Planning Commission and from John today.
Maybe just two thoughts. One is, in the guiding principles, you're really looking for an endorsement of what you're going to be doing, and if there's good work underway, you want to make sure and create room for that in the plan. So between the guiding principles and the work that needs to be done to accomplish those, which we're still yet to kind of flesh out, if that isn't well defined, then we haven't done our job right. So I think it's more than anything, it may be something for us to just keep our eye on, or you guys can help us do that too. It does get a little bit. Sometimes some people think they're doing a good job, and others don't think they're doing a good job. So as apolitical as you can be with the guiding principles, oftentimes you can advance the ball a little bit better. So more than anything, I think that's something for us to just keep in mind as the plan moves forward into a draft, and for you to keep holding us accountable for. The other point is about the Big Ideas map, and I think perhaps we need to think about the name of that map. And Jim, you kind of touched on it. Originally, the Big Ideas were geographically specific projects, and more than that, they were projects that the city had, as an entity, had a large amount of control over. So when we start getting into big ideas for, say, education, the city as an entity has slightly less control over that as a concept, and it's also less geographically specific. So either if there are specific projects that we think we can accomplish in those other categories, perhaps the big ideas are just big ideas regardless of geographic location, and this becomes more of a map of urban design or public realm improvements. So I think one piece of due diligence for us to do would be, particularly in the less geographically specific areas, to be seen if there is one defining big idea or project, or if we just need to be changing the categorization of what the big ideas are.
Yeah, I think that's a good comment, Stephen. And I mean, I know initially we were looking at it as more of a geographic location in terms of a particular project that the city would have primary control on. When you get into some of these other things that the city doesn't have, that total control, I think it's a little harder to graphically place or geographically place that somewhere. But I don't know, any comments from the steering committee? Maybe we want to move a little bit away from what we have in terms of a concept with the Big Ideas map as a geographic location for a particular feature, and have something that's maybe a little more concept-based. I'm curious for thoughts.
Well, Jim, and perhaps the consultants can weigh in on this too, but I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing, because all of these things are important that we're discussing. But I think what we're doing is confusing guiding principles with initiatives. And we're mixing and mingling those two things within this whole context. I mean, a permanent flood protection is an initiative, and where it may be a very important initiative, it's not the same conceptually as the guiding principle that we subscribe to education and arts and culture and things like this. So depending on how important that is to everybody and how important it is in the framework for the consultants to be putting this thing together, I mean, we're really talking apples and oranges here that intermix, but are conceptually two different things, I think.
But don't we need to talk about opportunities also? I mean, where do they fit in? Like, I think of what's going to be happening downtown with the major reconstruct needed for not only just the one-way pair, but the entire downtown. Can we do something to enhance the appearance of the NDSU village, part of downtown? And we're talking about permanent flood protection on 2nd Street. Can we incorporate some things there that add a little pizzazz? And so I see that as an opportunity, and those are coming. And I think we as engineers need guidance from your group as far as what are those opportunities and what can we invest in and make better?
No, I think that's a good comment. I know when we first were looking at this, and I think John made a good point about the fact that you have the guiding principles are the main policy statements for the city, what's important for us. And so we've got this list of 9 now. The big ideas map was really specific projects that people seem very interested in that the city would do. And then they tie into the guiding principles. They themselves are not guiding principles, but they're projects that the participants in the public meetings and the mind mixer said, hey, we would really like to see this. Like, we want to see this citywide trail loop system. That is something that, physically we would like to have, and it really ties in with a lot of the policies that we've had in place. And some of these other things, and again, like John mentioned, they're really more of an initiative. They're not necessarily a policy. So I guess we want to be careful about trying to, if we try to pull in something with economy or economic, that might be, again, more of a policy type of thing versus a specific project. But so I think it's a good observation. So I think I'll move along at this point in time. And again, if there's other comments that you have, by all means, let me know. But I want to talk a little bit about the survey that was completed that we'd sent out to the Home Builders Association and also to the Chamber of Commerce. We had about 100 and a little over 100, I guess, respondents from the Chamber. From the home builders, we had a little under 45 folks that responded. There's also some people from service clubs that responded to this. Does everybody have a copy of the actual survey? I think we asked about occupation. I think it was about 25% of them said they were in the construction, so that was probably the most dominant in terms of the respondents in terms of what they were doing. We asked the business environment. We wanted them to rate the following factors as it relates to the ability of doing business in the city of Fargo. And all of these, I thought, were actually in the more positive realm. I think what I'm seeing from this is that Fargo's doing a good job, and we want to continue to do that. But we talked about workforce, that being the ability to find qualified people for jobs, and 47% said that they thought it was good. I do think, what I'm seeing there is that we have a good workforce now, but we probably can look at that, what can be done with higher education in terms of that retention. Talked about higher education itself and the ability of the university to produce qualified individuals. Excellent. We're right up in the top. John Q. Paulson mentioned that we met with Dean Bershani earlier this week, and one of the things that I heard from him is that we actually are probably not going to have the ability to have like Sanford, they're doing their big expansion. They don't have enough qualified people graduating out of our system to service that particular entity in our community. Microsoft with Hitachi as well. Do we actually have enough qualified people for those new employers in town? And I'm hearing from the president we actually probably don't. So it's been very important to ramp it up. Based on the survey, obviously, I think people are looking at it as excellent, but it's something that we don't want to forget as well. K through 12 ranked very high. We had 48% said that was good. This one I thought was interesting. We start talking about culture and arts and the ability of arts and culture amenities to attract and retain high-quality skilled workforce. 43% thought that was good and important. We also looked at rankings in terms of local government regulations and policies. This gets into my realm here, and I'm glad to see that we had a good on that one. And again, this was primarily home builders and the Chamber of Commerce, so business owners. Local government quality of services ranked good. We had 61%. Local tax environment, a little surprised by this one. We were in the fair. I know we have a lot of comments about high property taxes and those kind of things, but and then special assessments as well was in the fair category. Flood control, this was basically looking at our effort to fight floods. It's not necessarily permanent flood protection, but that we've done a really good job with that. 34% of the respondents thought we did a good job. And then the second one that you see down there on the bottom of the list is the city's approach to actually working on a permanent flood protection. 37% thought we were doing a good job with that. Climate, what kind of impact that has on our workforce. 47% said that was fair. I actually thought that might have been a little worse, but maybe it's indicative of our fall that we've had this year. Everybody's enjoying the nice weather. Looking at some of these other ones down here, again with the climate, for as far as attracting, kind of middle of the road there with the fair. Snow removal in terms of the city's efforts for dealing with that was good. The geographic location in terms of our area for attracting businesses, that was good as well. Infrastructure, we've been doing a good job. 66% of the respondents thought we were doing a good job there. Same thing with communication and infrastructure and air travel.
Jim, who again now participated in this?
It was primarily sent to it was sent to the Home Builders Association, so they sent it out to their members, so respondents from that organization, as well as the Chamber of Commerce. So members of the Chamber of Commerce are the ones that completed the survey.
Well, and it's interesting to look, you picked the one that had the highest percentage, but if you look, right or left and see which way it's tending, again, snow removal, tending towards average or fair. The most are in that category, and the other one was flood control. The approach of the city heavily tending towards fair instead of excellent, which I thought was kind of interesting, and we're pushing towards that. So that concerns me a little bit. Special assessments obviously tending from fair to poor. Local tax tending from fair to good, which helps. And interesting which way it's tending, up or down.
And I think what you're seeing there, actually the next two slides kind of summarize the entire survey pool, not just the highest category, but those advantages that we're seeing as doing business in Fargo is that we do have a good workforce, good work ethic, and we do have the education facilities in town. We've got a good, stable economy, low crime, good access, affordable homes, a lot of those different things that I think a lot of communities would be very much in desire to have, like Fargo. But when you come down to doing some barriers, you mentioned that there was the most respondents said we were in the fair category, but there was a lot of folks that didn't have us in that category or less than that. So property taxes, special assessment, obviously an issue. That flood control, we heard that over and over from the interviews that we had and from people at the public meetings, the importance of permanent flood protection. The other issue with this is certified protection. We do have the new FEMA firm map that's going to be coming out and ultimately implemented and pulls a lot of property. Rocky, go ahead.
I just had one comment on here. I saw air travel was listed in the comments several times. I don't know what the city can do about that necessarily, but under transportation, we don't mention air travel at all. And it seems like that's a huge piece of travel, especially with we're trying to become more international with our businesses and more national companies moving here. That air travel is a key piece of the puzzle, and it seems like that should be part of our transportation outlook.
And that's another one that was tending from good to fair, and I think our air travel is superior here, but that's maybe not correct.
That's a good comment.
I think that has mainly to do with the cost of air travel.
Jim?
Yep.
Are you planning on expanding this as a survey? I mean, if we're going to be looking at these data as inputs for decision-making or emphasis or something like this, we're only talking about 130 people, and they're from very specific focus areas.
It's a great comment. Maybe I should explain a little more about why we did the survey. The public meeting, the Mind Mixer site, in terms of public participation, really involved people that were, I don't know if I have the right term here, the cultural class or the creative class were probably more dominant at those meetings than than others. And I know there was a concern that we weren't reaching out to businesses, to business owners, and that we wanted to make sure that we had their comment and the input. And so that's why we ultimately wound up generating the survey and focused on the home builders and the chamber. Obviously, the more people that are involved in this process, the better. I mean, we've tried to encourage as many people to come attend the public meetings, participate on the Mind Mixer website, but you know, there's limitations there, I guess. And you know, I'm curious from this group, you know, if there are other efforts that we should try to make to try to reach out to people. I would love to have every single person in the city of Fargo comment on the comp plan. That would be fantastic. So I guess I'm open to
I'll
thoughts.
just say one thing about the survey too. This is the only thing where we've seen the number of people that have commented. I know on the Mind Mixer site we've talked about page views and you know how popular it is, but the number of people that have actually made comments really isn't that outrageous compared to this 100 and some people either. So I mean, I think this is actually pretty high number of people in comparison to the online site and how many people made comments on there as well. How many different people registered to make comments. I don't know if we have those numbers available, but we don't usually focus on those numbers because they're not quite as impressive, because when you only see 100 people, in 100,000.
And even the public meetings themselves, the first meeting we had, which I thought was an excellent meeting, we had a lot of diversity in terms of participants, but we probably had about 100 people. You know, we've got 105,000 people that live in our city. The second meeting, it was probably about half that, and we had probably close to the same number of people, but about half that were NDSU students. So I know that's why we were looking at this survey. To me, I think that's the importance of our role as technical and steering committee members is trying to understand that, you know, this is a snapshot of you know, a certain segment of the population. When we look at this survey, maybe there's another separate snapshot in terms of the public meetings and the Mind Mixer. But our job, I think, is to try to understand what's going on for all the citizens of the city of Fargo. Hopefully we've got a lot of the major leaders in our community at this table that are involved in a lot of different aspects of our community, and hopefully representing well the folks that you work with and work for.
I think you hit the nail on the head there, Jim. I think you got a snapshot here, and it's got to be taken into the context of all the other public input that you've received. I think you got 2 industries here. And you guys have received a ton of other feedback and input throughout the process, and I think you just got to kind of take it as, you know, as a component to all the other public input that you've received, and go forward from there.
Yeah, the next couple of slides that I have is really kind of in that line because we had a lot of people talking about the arts and culture and the importance of that. There was probably you know, majority of folks, that's where they were focusing on, was the importance of that. And this one was asking specifically about those key initiatives that we've got set up, and it talks about bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure. And so it's asking home builders and business owners, how important is bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure? Do you support that? The high category here, 38%, said they actually supported that kind of stuff. Talking about Brad's comment, if we take a look at the entire spectrum there, from the neutral over, I think it's clearly showing that there is actually support from home builders and from businesses that they would like to see more bicycle pedestrian infrastructure. Public art, the same kind of thing. There's more people on the strongly support. Well, I guess we've got 30% of the neutral side of this thing, you know, so maybe it's a little more balanced there. But it's not saying, hey, we don't support this. I mean, to me, I think that's fairly telling. Energy efficiency, looking at ways to try to conserve energy. Clearly, that's much stronger in the support category than it is on, you know, somebody that's opposed to putting together those kind of initiatives. Design standards. I was actually surprised by this one about the strong support. The majority of them was actually, hey, we really would like to see this, and you look at it from the neutral over, it's really a lot of strong support for design standards. I don't know if I would have expected that from this particular survey. And to me, it somewhat bolsters the comments that we heard from the public and from the Mind Mixer, so I thought this was a particularly good slide.
John, one comment, it seems like where we're going with the public art, they support a program. They aren't really supporting public dollars. I think they're trying to get more private dollars there, they'd like it either to go into the developer and to help, as Mike said, have some dollars go in when we design these features. But I think we're all having a hard time trying to set aside city dollars or whatnot for that. And so that's the dilemma we're in, is the funding mechanism. Linda?
Well, the only thing I would like to just add to the art discussion, art and culture discussion, is a lot of the questions and suggestions seem to be talking about new things, new pieces of public art, new gathering spaces, new festivals, that sort of thing, where the other areas talk about building on existing infrastructure, whether it's strengthening the existing bus system, you know, adding routes, making it more serviceable. And I think just to kind of keep that concept in mind when we're talking about the whole area of arts and culture is that we have an existing arts and cultural infrastructure in this town, and I would hate to see all the attention placed on focusing dollars on new things and understanding that the existing cultural infrastructure we have has areas of being pretty fragile and having things being cut, and to be able to maintain even the quality of what we have is going to take some attention.
Yeah, that's a great, what I'm hearing you say is that if we've got limited dollars, or we're suddenly focusing everything on the new stuff and totally forgetting about the old, and we don't want to do that. That's a great point, yeah. The next couple of slides, this is actually from the report itself, or from the survey, and just some comments about culture and the arts. This one is, you know, Fargo-Moorhead is doing a good job of retaining qualified, educated young people. I have more than 20,000 students here, you know, 4 to 5 years. You know, it's not like any other college town across the country. And they're making a point here that we having a tough time retaining these kids. You know, how do we make Fargo more hip? And maybe arts and culture would actually do that. Talks about Fargo being a very desirable place to live and work in the upper Midwest. And how do we remove that stigma about Fargo? You know, that is there ways that we can do that? It's just not some cold place on the tundra. And arts and culture, you know, could probably help us out with that. And then the last comment, just talking about the visual impact. You know, you know, just from that particular comment, I think about, you know, the things that we've done downtown, but I've heard a lot of people talk about our corridor to get to downtown, that being Main Avenue, is not very aesthetically pleasing, you know, and can we improve on the visual impact on our community?
I'd like to reinforce Linda's comment about the fragility of we have a wonderful arts culture in this community, but financially it's fragile. And this is not a new phenomenon. I mean, it's going on all over the country, but we need to worry about continuing to adequately fund a wonderful arts culture which we have in this community.
Some comments about bicycle. And again, these are coming from the folks that filled out the survey. Like the idea of having a pedestrian and biker-friendly town. Very much supported that. The idea of physical well-being and exercise. You know, bike sharing program would be nice. Talks about downtown lanes on the streets, more bike parking. You know, maybe that would bring some of the youth back downtown. And this particular person made that comment about. The last comment, a little more maybe a little on the flip side, where it talks about the infrastructure itself. Maybe it doesn't have to be on every single local street, and that's one of the things we were looking at where we talked about signature complete streets and also as a you know, making sure that we've got those services throughout town, but there's maybe certain streets that we want to focus that on. For example, 45th Street I think about, or maybe 52nd Avenue. I don't know if we necessarily need bike lanes on those roads because they are, you know, faster corridors, and maybe it makes more sense that we'd say, well, if we're going to have bike lanes, let's maybe shift it over to 42nd Street, those kind of things. Special assessments and taxes. Obviously, I think we're hearing comments from the business side that, you know, taxes are too high, special assessments are too high.
Where are these comments? Are just in general off the website?
No, these are from the surveys. So they're actually,
survey.
Yep, it's in your packet. So these are just some samples that we pulled off from
Reminds me a little bit of talk radio. They don't have to say their name. They just make these brash statements and run. But I mean, some of them are good, but some of them
Yeah.
are pretty.
So the same thing with the flood comments, just an example of some of the things that were said by some of the participants in this.
No, I agree with you, Commissioner Wimmer. To say that Fargo needs to be more hip so the kids will stay, what the hell is that?
Well, some of them are.
Well, I mean, what's hip? What makes people stay?
Bars open till 3 o'clock. I'm
Well,
not sure.
I'm just saying, you've got to have business, you've got to have, I mean, to put up art, that can make people stay in Fargo. You've got art in downtown Fargo.
For that person.
The next area that I really want to focus on, and this is probably one of the more important areas, we've been talking about this, is the actual key initiatives themselves. And this is prioritizing these different initiatives. So like Roger's comment there is, in terms of, do we want to spend tremendous money on the arts? Is that necessary? That's what I really want to look at here, is trying to prioritize some of these initiatives that we actually have before us. This particular slide here shows some of the highest priorities that were actually weighted from both the public meetings, the steering committee, the Mind Mixer site.
Do we have this in our stuff here today, this screen?
On the back side of the guidance.
Okay.
Yep, that's it. The back side of the guiding principles is that one handout, is a single-page handout. This guy right here. But in terms of the weighted rank, the number one priority was permanent flood protection. I don't think that's a huge surprise when we start to take a look at that. But if you do take a look at the ranking that we had, if you start to go down on some of these and start looking at this, talked about, where was it, tree canopy, kind of midway, about a third way down from the top. That was actually the number one concern from the public meeting in terms of the highest rank. The steering committee, this is that bean count that we had. When the steering committee, we had actually 16, so it ranked midway down the list. So I think it's a little interesting when you start to look at the public comment, the Mind Mixer site, and also this particular body here. But the reason that I thought the slide that's up there with the highest priorities, you start to see that kind of weighted rank when you try to pull in the public meeting, the steering committee, and the Mind Mixer rankings of these. What are some of the top priorities? And again, flood protection is that top one, promoting infill. But we have public art that actually ranks number 3 as in terms of importance from the folks that were involved in these exercises that we've had. Transportation, this idea of bike pedestrian infrastructure, ranked number 4. So just to give you an idea where folks are putting these. The next one down in terms of some of the middle priorities that we had in place, we see economic development being very important. Still that arts and culture is still in the middle of this. They're asking for festivals and cultural events. So you start to see some of the different rankings that we have for some of these. Some of the lower priorities that we have here in terms of ranking. So really what I'm looking for from the group now is this page that you have. You can see where folks ranked each one of these key initiatives, and are these ranked correctly? Are there things here that you'd maybe pull out or you'd maybe shift in terms of their importance? And so I guess I'm curious where folks are at.
I just got a couple comments, Jim. I guess I'm kind of curious. You look at number 1 there, water, environment, permanent flood protection. You look at the Mind Mixer rank, and it comes in at 20. But I think if you look at, where some of these shake out, I think you can tell who the demographic is that, is using that Mind Mixer website, which I think is kind of interesting. But I think it's pretty telltale. You can kind of see who that group is that is online, their ranking. And I guess I'm just kind of curious if you have any ideas on, why that permanent flood protection would kind of shake out so low in that demographic.
Well, I mean, just my own observation, I think, is from the folks that were participating in Mind Mixer, you're probably dealing with a younger demographic. What's important to them was probably more geared towards the arts and culture, downtown living. You made the comment about the hip, that kind of thing is probably the folks that were commenting on that were probably more from that demographic. The public meeting, I think you had maybe a little more discussion about the importance of the water environment. I look at this particular group, I think you start to recognize that everybody at this table really understands the importance of flood protection, and that's why it's ranked number one. But that's just my own observation. Linda?
I think to answer your question, too.
Jim, maybe just a couple of clarifications.
Go ahead, Stephen, and Linda.
Okay, sorry. Just to give you a little bit more detail on who these people are, the number of people participating, and what some of the intentions were while you're digging through this. Just to let you know, Mind Mixer, the average participant was 40 years old, and we had about 3,000 visits, unique visits to the site, of which about 300 and change were active participants, which give you that average age of 40. I think also the question was why it ranked low on the Mind Mixer rank. Two things. One, I wouldn't worry about that too much. 20 isn't that low, and it still turned out to be ranked number one. But the other item is it was just, I think the Mind Mixer site was geared more towards new ideas, and so most of the conversation was energized around topics that people hadn't already spent a lot of time thinking about. So that may give you just a little bit of context about the conversations that were happening online. And finally, Jim, you might have mentioned this, but the rankings, to come up with the weighted rank, we just split them evenly, and that's one thing that the group could be considering too, whether or not we have the weights in the right place.
Thanks, Stephen, for the clarification. I know Linda had a comment.
Yeah, it was my response to your question about the same kind of thing, is when we were asking people to visualize the future, what will Fargo look like, what's important to you, I think they assume we're going to do the nitty-gritty stuff. You know, I think people have an assumption that infrastructure is going to be there. We're going to figure out the flood protection thing, but when they're asked, what's important, what kind of a community do you want to live in, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, one way or another, deal with aesthetics. And to answer the what the hell question, it's important to people. And that's what separates a community you want to live in from a community that, who cares? It's not any better than any other community. That would be when we're dealing with less than attractive weather, those are the kinds of things that human beings want to be surrounded with, that matter, that would put us head and shoulders above other communities in the upper Midwest.
I think
my sense on it.
Coming from the younger community, when we're talking about what are people staying in Fargo for, being someone that's right on the verge of making that decision, I'm going to go ahead and say that art is not even a priority for me. I'm going to stay here if we develop infrastructure, if the economy stays well, if it's a good place for a family to live in. I'm not going to stay in here because of art. I mean, I know it's ranked top in this, but it's not going to be one of my top priorities for staying in Fargo.
Can I make a comment? But to me, as a public official, that's influential to me, that's the third highest thing. And so to me, it does play a part in, you want to live in a beautiful place. That's part of, I mean, you want your house to look nice, or most people do. Ours doesn't all the time. But I mean, that's part of it. And can I just say how this will tie in? To give you an example, so the downtown with more density living downtown, well, the way this could apply in a short period of time is our MAT bus system. Well, maybe instead of expanding our system to cover more and more of the city, we should increase the frequency of the buses in the downtown, and that will impact. Then people start to realize, hey, I don't need a car. I'll rely on the bus system. So these things will have an impact in a short period of time, and so this is a very important thing. And we can do things that will affect. Mike, I don't know if you're following me, but I do think that
You're reading out of my book. I love it.
Unfortunately, Mike has influenced me a little bit. But anyway, that's a very real way that we can change in a short period of time, and that's by spending tax money. So that's the end of my spiel. And actually, Linda is also
Sit right next to this guy.
She's also, but those are true statements. And we as public officials, when we see that the second below flood control is arts, that to me is very influential. So that's the end of my sermon for this morning. Thank you.
Representing the housing side, when I see promote infill this high on the list, and I look back at the last 5 or 6 or 7 years of our community and how we've handled infill, we've used infill sites for Habitat for Humanity and the Fargo Public Schools to build houses on for their students. We have never put out RFPs. We've never had design competitions to enhance neighborhoods and create, really splashy things in these infills. Maybe this tells us we better start looking at it differently.
Can I just add one more thing? The infill is happening in downtown Fargo, where people that were living in other parts of town, when their kids grow up, they want to have just a condo and don't want to have the responsibilities. But to me, as a city, we have to have all varieties. We can't just say, no, we want to have all dense living in downtown Fargo. You got to have what people want to buy, and that's what realtors are responsive to and builders are. But we got to have the broad, we can't just swing from one side to the other. But I do think we're going through a change in our downtown, and we are having people move into the downtown that love it now, and it's a great thing. So we just want to keep building on that.
Mike?
And Jim, I just wanted to make a quick point to put it into perspective. Rocky made a good point about, weighting this thing. And I think, Steve, tracking the demographics, 40 is a little older than I would have guessed for the mind mixer participation. That's a good thing, I think. But the other is 3,000 unique participants. Part of this Go2030 is not that we're going to come up with the master plan that's carved in stone, that this is a living thing that we engage the community with. So, what is 3,000 participants? Well, in the last mayoral election, there was less than 8,000 voters.
There's
So
300.
it's
There's only 300 participants.
What did they say?
Yes.
300. But we had 7,900 people vote for mayor. So 300 is a pretty good representative example. And then you have the 50,000 comments. So I think the trick is, how do we keep the community engaged? Home builders, the commerce, the public at large, and keep them showing that they can have an effect on their environment with their ideas. And we're already doing that here. The one-way conversion is one of the things they had in here, and that's done. Increased busing, we got 2 more bus routes. So some of these things, I think we need to check off the things that have been done, have been presented, and I think we got a pretty good list of things that are being done because of the ideas brought forward already in this last 7 months.
Jim, I'd like to ask a question of you and perhaps of the consultants. This group has been together any number of times for the last, 8, 9 months. Are we making progress toward an eventual conclusion is a question, or are we rehashing every time subjects that we've talked about before? I mean, are we moving toward a conclusion? And do you and do the consultants think that we are?
I absolutely think we are. I think at this point we probably have those guiding principles really established. There's maybe some fine-tuning in terms of adding some specific words to those, but I think those are set. I think the key initiatives are probably are set as well. There's maybe some re-ranking. I guess I'm kind of curious what this group is thinking, if they're comfortable with this. But really at this point in time, the other document that you have is that draft document. That is the working document that's pulling in these key initiatives that we have in place. And partly what we're looking for is that we're looking at this weighted rank that you see in the right-hand side column as the kind of the more important ones as you start to go down. And that's the way we'll set this up. And so we've got a working draft with that. But if there's something here that is glaringly missing, if there's something that needs to be reprioritized, that's what we want to hear from you. But we're actually very close to having a finalized draft for this body to be taking a look at it.
Jim, do you feel comfortable in terms of how this is weighted with the groups that have sent in their comments, the surveys? I mean, is that a weighted survey that you've got this group, or are we looking at just a specific age group?
I'll be honest, I would rather see a lot more participation from people in Fargo. Like I said, we had 100 people at the first meeting, less at the second meeting. We had 300 plus, I guess, separate individuals that were participated on Mind Mixer, had 3,000 separate ideas, and I think there was some 50,000 hits, people looking at it, maybe commenting, that kind of thing. That is not a huge segment of our population by any means. I think that's why this group is so very, very important, to make sure that we're, looking at all of this stuff and trying to understand, what the groups of people that we may, like you in the Park District, who you represent, those kind of things. Ron?
Well, I just wanted to add a little too, and I think it touches that and a lot of what everybody said, but we are a very diverse community. We are getting larger, and we got to be careful that we don't focus just on infill and this. There's people that want to live in the normal suburban type setting. There's nothing wrong with a destination commercial retail settings. Everything doesn't need to look the same, and I just think we need to be really careful especially when we have a bunch of policymakers sitting in here too, that we don't start driving too much detail, too much policy in this, but it does stay a guiding principles and an overview, because there's going to have to be a lot of flexibility. But we really are emphasizing a discussion on a lot of new ideas, a lot of new things, but as you said, this is a very small segment of the population, both through Home Builders Chamber and the public meetings, that have really had input. Not everybody wants this, and we have to keep that in vision. We need a city that we can be mobile, we can get from point A to B, they can live out here. Not everybody wants to ride a bike to work or have a coffee shop right outside their place. So I guess the only thing is, let's not get it too detailed either. I don't know how that is, but that we keep it a general guiding policy that includes everything.
Can I make a comment about the Mind Mixer? To me, we're going to hopefully meet about this, but I'd like to keep the Mind Mixer going, because I think we need to be responsive to what people that aren't the old guard, or however we want it, that college students and people from outside the area are looking for, because I think that's our marketing for our city. And sometimes we are used to having the same group of people that agree with us, and I think it's important to listen to outside people, what they're looking for, and what we can do to appeal to them. So like the comment about why do we need that? Well, sometimes if you live here, you take it for granted, and we have to start looking for what other people are looking for so we can appeal to them.
Bob?
With that in mind, as I was looking at the key initiative ranking, this group is really influential. The top 10 of the weighted rank are the exact same initiatives that are the top 10 in the steering committee rank. They're not in the same order, but they're the exact same 10 initiatives. And if you look over to Mind Mixer, to get all of the top 10, you have to go down to line number 16. And I think whoever said it before, that looking at permanent flood protection and ranking that 20 on Mind Mixer, I think there's a couple things that influence that. One is that there is a sense that that's being taken care of by a certain segment of the population, and that, I think, just lowers it. And then I think, quite honestly, I think there hasn't, the public information side of flood protection has been pretty difficult to follow. So it was easy for that group to put that number 20, whereas the steering committee rank, we talk about it, and most of the people here have a little closer association with flood protection and what's going into it, so that would rank number 1. But I think we need to pay attention to, if we go down to line 20, for example, and look at what's down there from all of the, from that point on up, and pay attention. You see that in the Mind Mixer, the things ranked number 2, 3, and 5 by Mind Mixer were overall 13, 14, and 15 in the weighted ranking. We got to pay attention that far down the list, I think, at least that far, because those are the people that we really invited and asked and courted to come into the process. The Mind Mixer was supposed to be the tool that was good for the young folks who normally wouldn't get involved, for the people who couldn't come to meetings, And I'm surprised, too, that 40 was the average age, but 40 is pretty young anymore for me. I don't know about you, Roger, but I'm getting to that age where 40 sounds mighty young. But I think, we have to pay attention down that list a little bit further. And, maybe as a group, we need to take a second look at this and say, well, we've got the top 10 here and it's the top 10 there. What happened to the top 10 in the other ones? And we can't lose track of them.
Jim, building on that is just when you compare, if you look at the survey from the home builders and the chamber, of those 4 categories they have, 3 of them are in the top 5 and are either good or excellent. So I think it reiterates Bob's point, is that there's some common denominators here where we're not far apart in any of these categories. So I think
means
that.
we're getting closer and
I
closer
think you're right,
to
yeah.
a conclusion.
Yeah. Bryce?
Yeah, I might just add, with the little perspective from other communities, you have a great deal of alignment between these 3. So I wouldn't sweat that too much. The other thing that I wouldn't sell short, and just to clarify it one last time, there were 7,000 different visitors to the Monster site, or 3,000, sorry, 3,000, and you had about 300 people that were active participants in the conversation. But also, Jim's been pounding the pavement, going out to talk to about everybody he could. You were at the police and fire picnic. You've been going on endless stakeholder interviews. And so I know it's always a tendency to say we wish there was more, and it's always true. But I'd say in comparison to other communities, you've had more participation and that the alignment is greater. So I wouldn't be too frustrated by that.
Great comments, Stephen. Thank you. Bryce?
Jim, I was just going to add to what Ron was saying, and Bob, I mean, looking at that top 20 list is a good thing, but the comments on ranking infill, going back to Ron's comments, that offering diversity in housing, neighborhoods, in the big picture, we're looking at guiding principles. And you do have to look at the big picture, and offering that diversity for housing or whatever is the way you attract businesses and empower the EDC to do their job too. So it has to be, diversity has to be included in that. So infill is important, but new development and offering the diversity needs to be there too.
But I think one of the things is that the nature of business will have flow of new development and suburban sprawl. That's what I do. But some of those other things won't happen unless there's leadership and incentives and a direction to stimulate it. So that's what's important about it. I mean, it's not saying that those of us that do the suburban sprawl aren't important, but the other things need the leadership more than normal course of business.
John, I mean, I think as we do this comprehensive plan, we're not really limited to, the top 10 or the top 12 or even the top 30 ideas. And so I think there's been good input from the steering committee on things we might want to add here. I think maybe one of the positive things today is I haven't heard anyone say that any of these ideas are bad, like, no, who cares about air quality? Let's drop that one. So I hopefully we've come up with a very comprehensive list of things we can work on. The deciding the top 10, that kind of gets into that annual budget and activities each year of the city commission, and so they're certainly going to look to this, and we know they can't probably do everything that we like to, but at least we've got a good list here of things we can work on. Some things cost money, some things don't, some things are going to save us money, but like even on the housing, I see, there's promote infill, but there's also quality new development. We're going to have both. And we certainly need to work on both, not just, and one's not more important than the other on a community-wide basis.
Are we going to have the opportunity to talk about any of the details that are in this bigger packet? Because there's some, I mean, the devil's always in the details with a lot of these. I mean, just to throw us out, I mean, there's talk about making form-based zoning code, which would change how we plan everything. And so when we're talking about a huge planning document, and then in here in the key initiatives, it says come up with a form-based zoning code to change how we zone everything and plan as a city of Fargo. I mean, that's a huge, huge thing that we haven't touched on. We haven't had any conversations between the industry and the planning office.
As well as impacts on affordability.
Yeah, what Bryce and Rocky are talking about is the main packet. I've actually gotten some feedback from steering committee members about this, but what I'm really interested in, if you do get an opportunity, I mean, if you want to go ahead and redline it, if you've got those kind of concerns, I absolutely want to have your comments from you. I do think that needs to be part of this review, especially the technical team that's working on this as we get this final draft put together. So absolutely want to hear from you about that.
Because there's a lot, I mean, design guidelines, we all agree that we should have design guidelines, but the only ones they mention in here are sidewalk cafes and dog-friendly areas. I mean, to include those, and I mean, those two are clearly the most important ones to put in there. I mean, I don't know how one makes it and one doesn't, but it seems like a lot of these details that we talked about, we can all agree on the generals, but these details are very interesting.
I certainly agree with you on the details. I remember one of our commissioners thought we could do a sign code in 2 weeks, and it only took 2 years, but.
Which commissioner was that?
Yeah, which commissioner?
What was that, Joe? But seriously, we do talk about this, we joke about the sign code, but in here it actually says limiting billboards and other visual clutter. I mean, I don't know if you want to get the sign guys to read this again and say, wait, now in your thing you're talking about limiting it more? I mean, we just went through 2 years of sign code, yet in this document it says to limit it more. So I mean, a lot of these things need to be very closely looked at. So.
In the comprehensive plan, you're right, we're not going to get into all those details, but we recognize, I think, that we're going to maybe move in a direction where there's some additional design standards, probably not everywhere. You know, I don't know what kind of detail they're going to be, but those are tough decisions, and the devil is in the detail on it.
I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to come here, and I just think we should almost break up each one of these topics and have people come in and actually look at the details of them, because I think we keep looking at these, the big ideas, and we can all agree on the big ideas. I mean, we all love Fargo, and that's why we're here, and so we want to keep it growing. And everyone, pretty much every community is going to have the exact same top 20 big ideas for the most part. It's these details and how we can do it is what's important.
Other thoughts from steering committee members in terms of process and some of the issues that Rocky's bringing up?
I'd just say that, this type of an exercise I think it is ongoing. So it's not just a one thing that stays static and then that's the law. It's just I think some goals that are identified, and then the real part is how do we design those strategies to try to implement those goals and to track it by the requirement of the grant that we got this with, so that establishing the baseline and determining strategies how to meet some of these goals. So I don't think this is supposed to be the answer for everything. I think it's more about what questions is the community asking for us to answer, and how do we work together to accomplish that.
That's a great comment. I mean, again, I've talked about this numerous times, but the comp plan is a policy document. It's not getting into those it shouldn't get into those really specific details. And so if we think about it as that overarching document that the city goes to in terms of policy decisions, I think that we'll be in good shape. And I think we're getting there, clearly.
I think you also have to recognize that, it is a policy document and there's going to be strategies in there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be one strategy to handle a certain aspect. There may be multiple strategies, and then they have to be vetted to some degree by the elected officials in the city, and to determine, what strategy are we going to pursue to, accomplish whatever the objective may be. I think that's a key piece of a comp plan, and just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. At this point in time, I would welcome any comments that you have about the draft plan itself. If you have questions about it, feel free to give me a call or other folks on the team, and we'll definitely try to answer your questions. Thank you very much.